Armin lived in a small town surrounded by fields and old roads that stretched into the horizon. Life there was simple. The mornings started with the sound of roosters, and the evenings ended with children playing in the narrow lanes until the sky grew dark. For many, this place was quiet and perhaps too ordinary. But for Armin, it was the life he had chosen after years of service in the Air Force. He was a man who carried both strength and calmness in his face, and even though his eyes revealed memories of difficult days, they also reflected warmth whenever he looked at his son Ali. Armin was not just a father. He was both father and mother to his boy since the day his wife passed away. Raising Ali alone was not easy, but he carried the responsibility with patience. Every day he made sure Ali went to school on time, did his homework, and learned the values of honesty, kindness, and discipline. In the evenings, when the work at his small repair shop slowed down, Armin would sit with Ali under the dim yellow light of a lamp and teach him about engines, tools, and machines. Ali loved listening to his father's stories about the days when he was a pilot and mechanic in the Air Force. He would imagine his father sitting in the cockpit of a roaring helicopter, guiding it through the skies, or working with his team to keep machines alive in the most difficult conditions. But those days were behind Armin now, or at least he thought so. On one particular afternoon, the sun was high, and the air carried the smell of warm dust. Armin was bent over the hood of an old truck, his hands greasy and his shirt damp with sweat. The truck belonged to a farmer who needed it for the harvest season. Armin wiped his forehead with a rag, then reached deeper into the engine. Ali sat nearby, watching his father with interest and occasionally passing him a tool. For Armin, this was happiness. He had no desire for glory or recognition anymore. The sound of turning wrenches and the laughter of his boy were enough. Then came the call. At first, Armin ignored the buzzing phone. He thought it was another customer asking about repairs. But when the phone rang again, he frowned, pulled it out of his pocket, and looked at the screen. The number was unfamiliar, long and official-looking. Something stirred inside him, a feeling he had not known for years. He pressed the button and held the phone to his ear. "Armin," the voice said firmly. It was not a question. It was a recognition. Armin's body stiffened. The voice was unmistakable. It belonged to General Rahim, a man he had served under for years. The general was known for his strictness, but also for his ability to recognize true skill in his men. Hearing him now felt like hearing a call from the past. "Yes, General," Armin replied slowly, unsure of what to expect. The general wasted no time. "A military helicopter has gone down during an urgent mission. The machine is critical, and the technicians at the base have failed to restart it. Time is against us, and we need someone who understands not just the machine but the pressure of the moment. I thought of you." Armin felt the weight of those words. His hands tightened around the rag he held. It had been years since he left that world. He had promised himself that his service ended when he returned home to Ali. His duty was no longer to the skies but to his son, who needed him more than anything. He glanced at Ali, who was still sitting on the stool, swinging his legs and watching curiously. "General, I left that life behind," Armin said carefully. "I am no longer part of the service. I have responsibilities here." There was a pause on the other side of the line. Then the general's voice returned, lower but heavier. "I know, Armin, but this is not about uniforms or ranks. Lives are at risk. We need the helicopter running. The technicians are doing their best, but they lack the field instinct you have. You can give us that chance." Armin lowered the phone and looked at Ali. The boy's innocent eyes studied his father. Ali could sense something important was happening. He had always admired the way his father once served the country, though he never truly understood the full sacrifice. Armin's heart twisted. Could he leave his boy again, even for a short time? "Who was that, Baba?" Ali asked softly. Armin hesitated. "It was the army, Ali. They need help with a helicopter." Ali tilted his head. "Will you go?" Armin sighed. "I am not sure. My duty is to you now." Ali stood up and walked closer. He was only 10, but sometimes his words carried the weight of someone far older. You always told me that if we can help someone, we should not turn away. If you can help, then maybe you should. The boy's words pierced straight into Arman's heart. He remembered teaching Ali those lessons. He had repeated them again and again, thinking he was preparing his son for a good life. Now his own child was reminding him of his own principles. Before Arman could respond, the general's voice came back through the phone. Arman, I will send a vehicle to pick you up. Decide quickly. Arman closed his eyes for a moment. He thought of his wife, of the promise he made to her to protect their son, of the quiet life he had built in this little town. But he also thought of the men and women out there depending on a machine that lay silent. He knew what it felt like to sit in a downed helicopter, counting seconds, waiting for a miracle. If he turned away now, could he live with himself? When he opened his eyes, his decision was clear. He raised the phone. I will come. Within an hour, the rumble of a military jeep echoed through the narrow lane of the town. Neighbors peeked from their windows, surprised to see such a vehicle stopping outside Arman's small house. Soldiers stepped out, saluted him, and opened the door. Arman hugged Ali tightly, whispering promises of returning soon. Ali's arms clung around his father, but his eyes shone with pride. As the jeep pulled away, Ali stood at the gate, watching until the vehicle disappeared. He knew his father was heading back into a world he had once left behind, and though he missed him already, he also understood something important. His father was not just his hero, he was a hero to many others too. Inside the jeep, Arman sat in silence, the countryside passing by in a blur. His mind returned to the days of his service, the drills, the missions, the machines that had become like companions in battle. He thought he had buried that part of his life, but now it was rising again. And somewhere deep inside, despite the worry for his son, a fire of purpose began to burn once more. The base awaited him. The silent helicopter awaited him. And perhaps fate itself awaited him too. The jeep rolled through the dusty road with steady speed. Arman sat in the back seat, his mind heavy with thoughts. The soldiers in the front were quiet, their eyes fixed on the road ahead. None of them dared to disturb the silence. They had been told who Arman was and why he was being brought to the base. Even though he looked like a simple man in plain clothes, they knew he was once a veteran whose name carried weight in the service. Arman leaned back against the seat and let the wind from the half-open window hit his face. The fields and houses of his small town were far behind him now. He thought of Ali standing by the gate watching him leave. The boy's eyes had been brave, but Arman knew that behind that bravery was worry. It was always difficult for a child to let go of a parent, even for a short time. Arman had promised to return soon, but promises were only words. He knew the world of machines and missions was full of uncertainty. His heart told him to stay with his son, but his conscience told him that duty was calling once again. The two feelings battled inside him, creating a storm that would not settle easily. The jeep finally entered the gates of the military base. The atmosphere changed at once. Soldiers moved in formation, vehicles rushed across the grounds, and the sound of radios filled the air. Everything felt tense and urgent. Arman stepped out of the jeep and looked around. He had not been inside a base for years, yet the smell of fuel, the sound of boots, and the sight of uniforms felt familiar, almost like stepping back into a memory. General Rahim walked toward him with firm steps. His uniform was neat, his chest decorated with medals, and his face stern as always. Yet when his eyes fell on Arman, a small spark of relief appeared. "You came," the general said, extending his hand. Arman shook it. "You asked, and I could not refuse. But I need you to understand. My life is different now. I left this behind for a reason." The general nodded. "I know. You are a father now, not a soldier. But sometimes the past chooses us again, even when we do not ask for it. Come, I will show you." They walked together toward the hangar where the downed helicopter had been brought. The building was wide and tall, filled with the smell of oil and the echo of hurried footsteps. Inside, the helicopter stood like a giant, silent and stubborn. Panels were open, wires were hanging, and tools lay scattered across the floor. A group of young technicians surrounded the machine, their faces tense with frustration. One of them, a young man with tired eyes, stepped forward. "General, we tried every method." The systems refuse to respond. It is as if the helicopter itself does not want to wake. The general's jaw tightened. He looked at Armin. "Do you see why I called you now?" Armin studied the helicopter from a distance. His eyes scanned every detail, the angle of the rotor, the panels left open, the wiring exposed. He noticed the little things the young men had missed. To the untrained eye, it was just a broken machine, but to him it was more than that. It was a life waiting to be restored. He walked closer, his hand brushing gently against the metal body. For a moment, memories of his service came flooding back. The long nights in distant fields, the desperate hours when lives depended on a machine roaring back to life, the relief when blades finally cut through the sky again. "Why is this helicopter so important?" Armin asked, his voice calm but curious. The general hesitated before answering. "It is carrying sensitive equipment needed for a mission across the border. Without it, the mission cannot move forward. The delay could put many lives at risk." Armin turned his eyes back to the machine. He understood now. This was not just about fixing a helicopter. This was about giving others the chance to survive, to return home, to keep peace where chaos threatened. He felt the old sense of duty pressing against his chest, but with it came a heavy weight of responsibility. The technicians watched him with a mixture of hope and doubt. They knew he was once one of the best, but years had passed. Could he still do it? Armin crouched down near the open panel. His experienced hands moved over the wires, the fuel lines, the connectors. He did not rush. Every motion was steady, as if he was listening to the machine breathe. After a long pause, he spoke without looking up. "Tell me exactly what you have tried so far." One by one, the technicians explained their efforts. They had checked the fuel system, the ignition, the wiring, and the hydraulics. Yet nothing responded. Armin listened patiently, nodding at times, frowning at others. When they finished, he finally stood up. "You did well," he said, surprising them. "But you are treating this machine like a puzzle." "It is not a puzzle. It is a partner. You cannot only follow the book. You must understand what it feels, what it has gone through. Machines carry memory too, and memory guides their silence." The young men exchanged puzzled looks, but they could sense the depth in his words. The general stepped closer. "Armin, can you do it?" Armin met his eyes. "I will try. But I must warn you, this will take time and it will take patience. The helicopter is not broken beyond repair, but it is hurt. To bring it back, I need to feel it the way I once did." The general nodded firmly. "You have my trust. Take what you need." Armin rolled up his sleeves. He asked the technicians to bring him tools, but he also made them stay by his side. "You will not just watch," he told them. "You will learn. Someday you will face a moment like this without me, and you must be ready." As the work began, the atmosphere in the hangar shifted. The technicians followed his instructions carefully, their respect growing with each step. Armin guided them with calm authority, showing them how to trace the problem not just with their hands but with their instincts. He taught them to listen for the faintest clicks, to notice the smallest vibrations, to understand the silence of the machine as much as its sound. Outside, the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the base. The clock was ticking, and pressure pressed harder with each passing hour. Yet inside the hangar there was a new sense of hope. Armin was there, and with him came the belief that the impossible could become possible again. But deep in his heart, Armin still carried doubt. He wondered if he was strong enough to balance this duty with the promise he had made to his son. He had chosen to come here, but would Ali forgive him if things took longer than expected? Would Ali understand if fate once again kept father and son apart? For now, Armin pushed those thoughts aside. The helicopter needed him. The mission needed him. And whether he liked it or not, the country needed him too. The hangar doors opened wider as Armin stepped closer to the helicopter. The machine looked lifeless, its body standing tall but silent. The giant rotor blades were still, as though frozen in time, and the heavy body carried scratches from the rough landing. To many of the young technicians, it was just metal and wires, a collection of parts refusing to respond. But to Armin, it felt like an old comrade lying on the ground, waiting to be lifted again. Around him, soldiers and technicians paused in their work, watching quietly. Word had spread that the veteran had arrived, the man who once kept helicopters alive in the most difficult of conditions. Some looked at him with hope, others with doubt. He did not wear a uniform now, and years had passed since he last stood in a hangar like this. Could he still rise to the task? General Rahim stood beside him, his hands behind his back. His voice carried authority but also urgency. Armin, we have tried for 2 days. Every hour we lose brings greater risk. Supplies meant for villages near the border are waiting. Without this helicopter, the mission fails. The technicians have worked hard, but the machine refuses to start. If anyone can bring it back, it is you. Armin nodded slowly. He understood the pressure. Missions were never only about machines. They were about people waiting on the other side. A downed helicopter meant food, medicine, and safety delayed. He crouched near the helicopter and placed his hand gently on the cool surface, closing his eyes for a moment. He remembered nights in faraway deserts when he had done the same, whispering to himself that machines carried a kind of soul. They broke, yes, but they also responded when treated with respect. Bring me the reports, Armin said. One of the young technicians hurried forward with a clipboard full of notes. Armin read carefully, scanning each line. The team had checked the ignition system, the hydraulic pumps, the control circuits, and the fuel supply. They had replaced a few parts, tightened connections, and run diagnostics again and again. Still, the helicopter stayed silent. Armin handed back the notes. You worked hard. You followed the book. But a machine in this condition cannot be handled only by the book. It needs someone who listens. The young men exchanged glances. They respected him, but they were unsure what he meant. Armin stood and motioned for the group to gather around. When you face a machine like this, he began, you must remember that it has memory. It has faced pressure, strain, and sudden shocks. You cannot only look at numbers. You must ask yourself what the machine has been through. That is how you find the hidden faults. His calm voice steadied the group. Even the general, who was usually impatient, allowed him to take his time. Armin climbed onto a small ladder and opened the top panel near the rotor assembly. His skilled eyes searched every detail, the wear on the bolts, the lines of grease, the tiny cracks near the hinges. He spotted things others had missed, little details that spoke of stress during the rough landing. He ran his fingers over a cable, noticing a faint burn mark that revealed a power surge. Check this line, he instructed one technician. Bring me a replacement if you have one. The young man rushed off. Armin continued. He traced the fuel system, following each pipe carefully. He bent low, listening as if expecting the machine to whisper back. Then he tapped a valve lightly with a wrench, hearing the faint hollow sound. This valve is misaligned, he said. It will not let fuel flow steadily. Fixing it is not difficult, but if you miss it, the entire system shuts down. The technicians scribbled notes, their respect growing. They realized that Armin was not just looking. He was feeling, hearing, and understanding the machine in ways they had not been trained to do. Hours passed. Sweat gathered on his forehead, but he never slowed. He guided the younger men step by step, correcting their motions with patience. He explained why each part mattered, why each sound could not be ignored. Sometimes he paused and told a short story from his service days, moments when a single loose wire had almost cost lives, or when quick thinking had saved a machine in the middle of nowhere. His words were not just lessons in mechanics. They were lessons in discipline, focus, and respect for responsibility. As the work continued, the atmosphere in the hangar shifted. Earlier, there had been frustration and defeat. Now there was energy and determination. Every technician worked with new focus, driven by the calm authority of the veteran guiding them. Even soldiers who had nothing to do with the repair stood nearby, silently watching as if witnessing something greater than a machine being fixed. But for Armin, the task was personal. Each time he tightened a bolt or adjusted a line, he thought of his son. He remembered Ali's words before he left. Help others when you can. Those words repeated in his mind, giving him strength to continue. He knew Ali was at home, waiting, but he also knew his son would want him to finish what he started. By the time night fell, the hangar was lit with bright lamps. Shadows stretched across the walls as Armin and his team worked through the evening. The general checked in from time to time, asking for updates, but he never rushed Armin. He trusted the man completely. Finally, Armin stepped back and wiped his hands on a rag. We have done enough for today, he said. The machine needs rest, and so do we. Tomorrow we will attempt ignition. The technicians nodded, exhausted but inspired. For the first time in days, they felt hope. The general looked at Armin with gratitude. You brought new life not just to the machine, but to the men as well. Whatever happens tomorrow, I thank you. Armin gave a small nod. Do not thank me yet. Thank me when the blades turn. That night, as he lay on a simple cot in the guest quarters of the base, Armin could not sleep easily. The noise of the hangar still echoed in his ears, the scent of fuel still lingered in his clothes, and the image of the silent helicopter weighed on his mind. More than anything, though, he thought of Ali. Was his son sleeping peacefully? Was he worried? Armin wished he could call, but phones were restricted in the base. He closed his eyes and whispered a quiet promise into the night. "I will come back, Ali. I will not fail you." The next morning, the real test would begin. The technicians had tried and failed. Now it was his turn to show that experience, patience, and instinct could bring a dead machine back to life. The fate of the mission rested on his shoulders. And though he carried the burden alone, he knew his son's faith gave him the strength to endure it. Morning arrived at the base with a pale sky. The air was cool and a faint mist lingered above the ground. Soldiers moved quickly across the yard, some preparing vehicles, others standing in lines as orders were given. Inside the hangar, the atmosphere was heavier than the outside air. The helicopter stood in the center like a giant waiting for judgment. Bright lights illuminated its frame and tools were laid neatly on tables after a long night of work. Armin entered the hangar with steady steps. His clothes were clean but simple, and his face carried both determination and calmness. The young technicians who had worked with him the day before gathered near the machine. They looked tired but hopeful. The general walked in as well, his expression serious. Everyone knew that today was the moment of truth. Armin clapped his hands once, gathering attention. "We worked hard yesterday. We corrected faults, replaced damaged parts, and realigned systems. Today we will attempt ignition. But remember, this is not only about pressing a button. It is about respect, patience, and discipline. If we rush, we fail. If we stay calm, we succeed." The men nodded. His words gave them courage. Armin climbed into the cockpit. His hands moved across the controls with natural ease, as if years had not passed since he last sat in such a seat. The cockpit smelled of metal and fuel, and the switches carried the same firmness he remembered from his service. He checked each indicator one by one, ensuring that nothing had been overlooked. Outside, the technicians stood ready. Some held tools in case adjustments were needed, while others stood by the fuel lines and cables. The general stood at a distance, his arms crossed, eyes fixed on the machine. The entire hangar seemed to hold its breath. Armin turned slightly and spoke through the open cockpit window. "Fuel line pressure?" A technician checked the gauge. "Stable, sir. Hydraulic levels? Balanced. Electrical systems. All circuits confirmed." Armin gave a short nod. He placed his hands firmly on the controls. His heart beat faster, but his face showed only calm. He pressed the first switch. A low hum filled the hangar as the systems awakened. Lights flickered on the control panel. The technicians leaned closer, listening to every sound. He pressed the second switch. The helicopter groaned and the rotor blades shifted slightly. A faint grinding noise followed, then silence. The technicians tensed. The general's jaw tightened. Armin did not panic. He adjusted a lever, tapped a gauge, and spoke calmly. "Recheck auxiliary power supply. It is not feeding correctly." One technician ran to the side panel, made a quick adjustment, and signaled back. "Corrected?" Armin tried again. This time the hum grew louder. The blades began to move slowly, dragging through the air as if waking from deep sleep. The engine coughed, paused, then rumbled faintly. The sound echoed through the hangar, raising the hair on everyone's arms. The technicians exchanged quick glances. Their eyes were wide with excitement, but also fear. The machine was responding, but would it last? Armin stayed focused. He adjusted the throttle carefully, giving the engine just enough to continue without forcing it. He whispered under his breath, not words of command, but words of encouragement, as if speaking directly to the helicopter. His hands moved with practiced precision, never hesitating. The engine roared louder. The blades spun faster, chopping the air with growing strength. Dust and small papers on the hangar floor began to rise and scatter. Soldiers stepped back to shield their faces from the wind. The sound grew from a weak rumble to a powerful roar, filling the entire space with energy. "It is alive," one technician shouted, his voice nearly drowned by the noise. The general allowed himself a rare smile. Relief washed across his stern face. He turned to the men nearby. "Do you see this? This is what experience and discipline bring. This is why I called him." Armin kept the machine steady. He checked each gauge as the blades reached full speed. The vibrations leveled, the noise stabilized, and the helicopter stood strong once again. For a long moment he simply listened to the roar, his heart swelling with pride and relief. Finally he powered down the system slowly, letting the blades ease to a stop. Silence returned to the hangar, but it was no longer the silence of defeat. It was the silence of triumph. The technicians broke into cheers. Some clapped their hands, others hugged each other in excitement. They had witnessed something they thought was impossible only a day before. The general walked toward the cockpit as Armin climbed down. He placed a firm hand on Armin's shoulder. "You saved the mission," the general said. "Without you, we would still be staring at a dead machine. Now we can move forward." Armin gave a small smile. It was not just me. The men worked hard. They only needed guidance. They will remember this, and next time they will be ready. The young technicians looked at him with admiration. To them, he was no longer just a veteran called back for help. He was a teacher, a mentor, someone who had shown them how patience and knowledge could defeat failure. As the excitement settled, the general spoke again. "The mission will resume immediately. The supplies will reach where they are needed. And it is because of you, Armin." Armin lowered his head slightly. "I did what I could, but my duty is temporary. My son is waiting for me. I came because you asked and because lives depended on it. But soon I must return home." The general respected his words. "Of course. But know this, Armin. The service still remembers you, and today you reminded us why." Later that evening, the base was filled with renewed energy. The helicopter was prepared for flight, and soldiers loaded the supplies onto it. The men moved quickly, their steps lighter than before. The sound of the helicopter's revived engine filled the base once more as it lifted into the sky. Everyone watched as it rose higher, carrying with it not only supplies but also hope. Armin stood at the edge of the runway, watching the blades cut through the sky. For a moment, memories of his past missions returned. The feeling of watching a machine rise again stirred emotions he had buried long ago. But then he thought of Ali waiting at home, and he knew where his true future belonged. That night, Armin sat in the quiet guest quarters again. He was tired, his body sore from hours of work, but his heart was lighter. He had done his duty, and he had not failed. He closed his eyes, imagining Ali's face when he would tell him the story. The boy would be proud. More than proud, he would understand what it meant to serve when called even for a short time. Armin whispered softly into the night, "It is alive again. Tomorrow I return to you, my son." The morning after the helicopter rose into the sky, the base was alive with renewed spirit. Soldiers walked with a sense of victory. Technicians spoke with excitement about what they had learned, and the general carried himself with relief. The machine had flown, the supplies had been delivered, and the mission had been saved. For the men at the base, this was a triumph that would be remembered for a long time. For Armin, however, the victory felt different. He was proud, yes, but he was also ready to leave. His heart had been with his son every moment he spent at the base. While the helicopter lifted into the air and while the cheers echoed through the hangar, he had thought of Ali. The boy had given him courage to return here, and now he wanted nothing more than to return to him. General Rahim met Armin outside the hangar that morning. The older man looked less strict than usual. His voice was softer too. "You did what no one else could. For that you have my respect as always. If you ever wish to return to service, there will be a place for you." Armin shook his head gently. "Thank you, General. But my service now is to one boy, my son. He is my future, and I cannot leave him again. I gave all I could to the country. Now I give what remains of me to him." The general studied him in silence, then nodded. "You are right. A man's greatest duty is not always in the uniform. Sometimes it is in the home he keeps and the child he raises. Your son is lucky to have you." With that, the general ordered a jeep to take Armin back to his town. Soldiers saluted him as he left, their faces filled with admiration. They knew they had witnessed something rare, not just the revival of a machine, but the reminder of what true experience and courage looked like. The ride back felt shorter than the one that had brought him there. The jeep rolled through the open countryside, past fields and small villages. Armin leaned against the seat, his mind filled with images of Ali. He pictured the boy waiting by the gate, his eager eyes scanning the road, his small hands gripping the wooden fence. The thought made Armin smile. When the jeep finally entered his town, the familiar lanes and houses came into view. Children played in the dust, women carried baskets, and men worked in fields. Life here was unchanged, peaceful, and simple. The jeep stopped outside Armin's modest home. Before the soldiers could even step out, the front door opened and Ali ran out. "Baba!" Ali shouted, his voice full of joy. He raced to the jeep and threw his arms around his father. Armin lifted him high and held him close, feeling the warmth and love he had missed so deeply. "You are back," Ali said, his face pressed against his father's shoulder. "I promised you I would return," Armin replied, his voice thick with emotion. He set the boy down and held his shoulders. "And I kept my promise." Ali looked up at him with wide eyes. "Did you fix it? Did the helicopter fly again?" Armin smiled. "Yes, it did. It is alive once more, stronger than before. The mission was saved." Ali's eyes shone with pride. "I knew you could do it. I told you to help, and you did. You are my hero, Baba." Armin knelt down to be at his son's height. He placed his hand gently on Ali's cheek. "Ali, listen to me. I fixed the machine, but it was your words that gave me the courage to go. You reminded me that helping others is not just a choice. It is a duty. You taught me something I once taught you, and you gave me strength when I needed it most. You are the true hero." Ali's smile grew wider, though his eyes filled with tears of happiness. He hugged his father again, holding on tightly. That evening, after the soldiers had left, Armin and Ali sat on the porch of their home. The sky above them glowed with the colors of sunset. The field stretched far and wide, golden under the fading light. It was peaceful, far removed from the tension of the base and the roar of the helicopter. Armin told Ali the full story. He spoke of the base, the silent helicopter, the technicians who had tried and failed, the long hours of checking and fixing, and the moment when the blades finally turned again. He described the roar that filled the hangar, the cheers of the soldiers, and the relief of the general. Ali listened with shining eyes, imagining every detail. To him, it was like hearing the greatest adventure ever told. When Armin finished, Ali asked, "Were you afraid?" Armin thought for a moment before answering. "Yes, I was afraid. Not of the machine, but of failing the people who needed it. And I was afraid of leaving you, even for a short time. But courage is not about having no fear. Courage is about doing what is right, even when fear is there." Ali nodded slowly, taking in every word. "I want to be like you one day, Baba. Brave and strong." Armin smiled and pulled him close. "You will be more than me, Ali. You will be wise, kind, and brave. And you will know that true strength is not just in fixing machines or flying helicopters. True strength is in keeping promises, helping others, and protecting those we love." The boy leaned against his father, feeling safe and proud. The world around them was quiet, but in that quietness was a lesson that would stay with Ali forever. Days passed, and life in the small town returned to its usual rhythm. Armin went back to his repair shop, fixing tractors and trucks. Ali went to school, carrying stories of his father's courage in his heart. The general later sent a letter of commendation, praising Armin's service once more. But Armin kept the letter in a drawer. For him, the real reward was not paper and words. The real reward was the pride in his son's eyes. Whenever neighbors asked Ali about his father, the boy would straighten his back and say proudly, "My Baba fixed a helicopter when no one else could." He answered the call and saved many people. And though Armin would smile quietly and shake his head at the exaggeration, he never stopped Ali from telling the story, for in that story was not only truth but also the bond between a father and a son. In time, the memory of the downed helicopter faded from the minds of many at the base. New missions came, new challenges rose. But for Armin and Ali, it was a moment that would never fade. It was the day when the past returned, when a veteran answered the call once more, and when a son's words became the light that guided a father. As years went by, Ali grew older. He never forgot the lesson of that day. He carried it into his own life, into the choices he made, and into the way he treated others. And though Armin never returned to service, his legacy lived on, not in medals, not in uniforms, but in the heart of his son, because in the end, the greatest mission Armin ever completed was not reviving a helicopter or saving a mission. It was raising a boy who understood courage, duty, and love, and that mission would never end.